What's up, everybody? This is Chris Nichols, and you're listening to an episode of the Nichols and Dimes Show featuring Connor Schwab. Enjoy.
You don't know what I'm about to do. Big explosion, get away right now. She's heating up, you're so active full. Slow down, man, I just don't know how. You don't know what I'm about to do.
Connor, man, thanks for coming over. How you doing?
Excellent, thank you. Happy to be here.
Oh, man, dude. So how does it feel to be back in San Diego?
It's there's something in the air.
Yeah.
So it's always magical coming back to San Diego.
How long did you live here?
Just a year.
Okay.
Just a year. But I had a good friend here before I moved here that I visited probably 3 or 4 times a year.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, so.
And so okay. Well, I'm going to read your intro and then we'll talk about the background because I am really interested in your journey. You've built some cool stuff. So guys, I'm here today with Connor Schwab, who is from Portland, Oregon. He currently lives in Bend, Oregon. He spent most of his career working in sales and recruiting jobs before becoming an entrepreneur. He helped found Sandy Vans, which is a company that converts Sprinter vans into luxury camping vans, or some people call it glamping, right?
Exactly.
He is currently vice president at Sage Outdoor Consulting, which consults for outdoor hospitality businesses across the country. He also is building Journey Vitae, which is a self-discovery program, which guides participants through an 8-week program. I'm excited to learn more about what's involved in that program. But Connor went to Santa Clara University, like I did. So, man, great to reconnect with you, dude.
Absolutely. Definitely.
Yeah, man. So, a lot of stuff going on. A lot of cool stuff. Maybe let's start with, you grew up in Portland. And you ended up at Santa Clara. I guess people come from all over the West Coast who went to Santa Clara, so that's not too uncommon. But what did you study at Santa Clara, and then what was your idea for getting started with your career upon graduating?
Yeah, I actually had 2 older brothers that went to Santa Clara.
Ah, okay.
And all 3 of us were mechanical engineers.
Ooh, okay.
And so at first, I absolutely didn't want to go and follow my brother's footsteps, and definitely wanted to go anywhere where they weren't to blaze my own trail.
Really?
And then I visited them in Santa Clara and had the best time, which you understand, and then I was sold on the dream. And actually, my youngest brother, so I have 3 brothers, he ended up going to Santa Clara as well. So
wow,
all 4 Schwab
hilarious.
brothers are Broncos.
Oh, man. Jeez. Okay. Yeah. So that makes sense because I've brought your name up to some other people and they've said, oh, I think I know his brother. I'm like, okay, it's probably true.
We're hard to keep track of.
Yeah. That's awesome, man. Okay. So mechanical engineering, what did you think you wanted to use that for? Was there an influence within the family to do that, or did you have an interest from a young age?
Yeah, I would say I've been on a pretty lost career path almost my entire life. And when going to Santa Clara, my dad encouraged me to do engineering because it would give you a lot of opportunities to try other things. It was kind of like, well, you can do business but not do engineering. But if you do engineering, you can switch to business if you want. And so I didn't really know anything else better to do. So I decided to gut it out, even though I had no interest in being an engineer.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you on that. So you just kind of pushed through it, and did you enjoy any part of it, or?
No, I can't say. I mean, the friends I met along the way, I would say, and it taught me about work ethic. Okay, I would say, and finding smarter people than me to help teach me the complex subjects so that I could get by. Yeah,
I hear that, man. Yeah, it looked brutal seeing the people on the engineering side of things at Santa Clara. But I mean, clearly I love how you said it's been a constant journey of trying to figure out what you're doing, because that really is the life of entrepreneurship. I feel like, right?
Yeah, and I guess maybe to kind of skip to the end or give any of your listeners a bit of overview. Sure. I guess maybe the theme of this would be I would say that 30 years of my life was on a very convoluted roller coaster path that took kind of all sorts of twists and turns, and a lot of failures along the way. And I would say now, finally, that I'm 31, things seem to kind of be firing on 4 cylinders, and everything's kind of paddling in the same direction. So it's all finally starting to come together after a long career of bouncing back and forth.
Well, what good timing then to talk to you about this on my podcast. That's awesome. And yeah, I definitely want to touch on some of the hard spots, right, where you maybe tripped and fell, because that's what I want to focus on. I want to get people to get to know you, get to know my guests as people, the people behind the work, and get some vulnerability out as well, and say, hey, this isn't just a glamorous life. It's actually quite the opposite. To start businesses, be an entrepreneur, that's certainly something I've found in all the conversations I've had, right, as a theme. But you finished at Santa Clara and you did some work, at kind of in kind of the corporate world, right, for a little bit, and so you got some business experience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And so how long did you do that until you decided, hey, I want to go start my own thing, and how did that start?
Yeah, so my first job out of Santa Clara was doing biotech recruitment and business development. And so I guess in a nutshell, I would call chief scientific officers at biotech companies and convince them to pay us to help them find very particular scientists to develop like the newest, most cutting edge medicine.
Yeah. Wow.
And yeah, so I did that for about 3.5 years in San Francisco.
Okay.
And yeah, I guess maybe to dive into that a little bit more. When I started out at that job, I thought the reason why I wanted to do the job was it was kind of my dream job. It was like, take clients out, go to golf courses and lunches and sales and
I was attracted by the same stuff in my sales career.
and be a corporate guy. And when I started that, I would say in at the end of my first year, I was the lowest performer in our whole office of 80 sales folks. And I was literally doing the worst. And I was on team of the year throughout the USA who were killing it. And I was pulling up the rear.
Ooh,
and
that's tough.
So that was really hard. And I kind of about 9 months in, was like, okay, well, I think I'm a decently competent and intelligent guy. Like, why is this happening?
This doesn't add up.
Yeah. And my dad gave me this book called The One Thing by Gary Keller. And it basically talks about, if you were just to focus on one thing that would make everything else in the job easier and help you hit your goals, what would that be? So reading that book, and then in a combination of, I decided to take out a lot of the top performers in our company to lunch to ask them about what they were doing and what was working. And first I asked my manager, learned a lot from that. And then I asked our director, and then I asked our VP, and then I asked our SVP. And a whole bunch of other people in other offices and in our office out to lunch. And I just kind of asked them about their strategy and what they were doing. Yeah. And kind of out of all of those interviews, I took little bits of what they were saying and eventually was able to devise my own strategy.
So how far into this job did you start to do that?
That was about 9 months in.
Okay. So you had a rough first 9 months and then you started to do this. How receptive was upper management to you doing this? Or did they see, hey, he really cares, he's genuine, or did they kind of try to dismiss you?
Super receptive. It was definitely intimidating to ask. Yeah. And I think, I gained a little bit more confidence with each person. I started with a teammate and then a top performer and then my manager and then the director, and kind of just kept going up and being like, are these people going to keep having lunch with me? And I ended up asking the CEO of the entire company to do the same thing. Wow. He actually said no. He was like, was too busy or didn't have time in his schedule. But everyone up until the CEO of the entire company of 3,500 people, it worked.
Well, good for you, man. Okay, so that's some balls right there. So how big was the company?
3,500.
Oh wow!
Yeah, it was a global company.
Yeah, and you asked the CEO.
Yeah, when he was at our office visiting.
Okay, that's awesome. So how would you describe? You said you got confident with each person you took out to lunch or drinks or coffee or whatever it was. How did you see yourself change at your performance throughout this period of time?
Yeah, when I was approaching them and asking them to chat, I basically said, hey, I really admire what you've been able to accomplish, and I want to learn more about your journey and what's working for you, and really wanted to just learn from them. And I think everyone is very receptive to that. And I'm sure you've noticed that with this podcast. When you ask someone to tell their story and give them the opportunity to do that, it's quite a affirming moment of identity, right? And everyone wants to talk about their story.
Wow.
I'm here excited about the opportunity to share my story. And so I think if you phrase it that way, people are really willing. And what I took away was kind of small bits and pieces. They'd tell me this whole story and I might like really identify or take away like 10% of that and start to kind of pull that piece into my own strategy. And ultimately what it boiled down to was when it came time to choosing my one thing, I chose client meetings. I set a goal. I was like, all I want to do each month, my only metric is to do 20 client meetings a month. And I shared that with the SVP and told him about the book I was reading. And he loved it so much that a month later at our annual USA conference, he unveiled the theme of the USA theme for whatever 2017 or whatever it was. And he's like, the new theme for S3 for 2017 is one thing. And he like called me up on stage to talk about it.
Whoa!
And made it the theme for the whole company that year.
You really turned it around.
Yeah, and it was. I mean, it kind of just stumbled into it, I would say.
Wow, that's cool, man. That's a cool story. I love that. Yeah, because I've had some similar experiences in my career as well, and it's like a big fall in the face and then a bounce up super high after that. That's really cool. So that kind of gave. I'm curious about what impact that had on you after you experienced that bounce up, right, in the long run. And so when you left this corporate job, where was your head at because of this overall experience you had there?
Yeah, it was. I guess maybe to put it in perspective, I started off, and I think like maybe the story of this journey is failures and maybe what lies on the other side of that. And at the end of my first year, lowest performer in the office. And then by my third year, I ended up being at the peak was number 20 out of 3,500 sales folks. And that was due to some great advice from some people who helped me along the way. And like at the beginning in San Francisco, when I was on a base salary, which was not a livable wage in San Francisco, like my first year of working full time, I ended up net negative $5,000 living in San Francisco. I had rent checks bounce, like landlord called me and chewed me out like screaming. And it was hectic. And then by the end, it was just like quite a turnaround. But being at that company, so it was a very sales oriented, very money oriented environment, and it was a great opportunity to learn, but I didn't really identify like what the values of the company or what the mission of the company was. And living in San Francisco, which to me is a very dense city, and I like to describe it to people as my life in San Francisco as I'd wake up in my crowded apartment, get on a crowded bus, go to my crowded sales office, talk to people all day.
Oh my goodness.
Get back on a crowded bus and go back to my crowded apartment all without seeing a tree. And
that is, wow, that's good. That's so accurate.
So it started to take a soul toll on me. And at the time we started this group called the Adventure Crew. And we basically would organize camping trips like once a month to Yosemite or Big Sur or, the Lost Coast.
So who's we?
Me and some of my friends in San Francisco, maybe like Johnny Flanagan, Mike Grinnell.
Nice. Okay.
And Nick Wenzel.
Yep. Okay.
And, the camping crew.
Okay. So you guys are just doing this for fun.
Yeah, it started really small, and then by the end of it, we had an email list of like 150 people. So whenever we were planning a trip, we'd just shoot an email blast out, be like, "Hey, we're going here in a month. Let us know if you want to come." And that was kind of the start of this outdoor segue, because living in San Francisco is really hard to camp for a number of reasons. One, because of the gear that you need, and if you live in a tiny apartment, you probably don't have a bunch of camping gear or like a 4-wheel drive car. And also in California, it's probably the hardest state in the U.S. to find a campsite because everything's booked up 6 months in advance, and I'm not much for planning 6 months in advance.
And there's usually a lot of rules with the California campsites, right? Like extra rules and payment and stuff.
Yeah, so it was really difficult. And it was kind of around that time when Hip Camp launched, which was about allowing private property owners to open up their sites for camping. And I was basically like, yeah, we're willing to pay, instead of $30 for a government campsite, I was like, we're willing to pay $150 to just get a site. Yeah. And we're going to have 10 people there, and it will be $10 a person, and that'll be well worth it.
Airbnb for camping?
Yeah, exactly. And so that was kind of like the start of this aha moment, because one time we went to Joshua Tree and we drove out there from San Diego, from here, and we were going to stay in Joshua Tree and go explore the park. And we drove out and every single campsite was full. And we were like, we kind of had two choices. We're like, stay in a hotel or drive 3 hours back to San Diego and not do anything this weekend. And then we're like, well, let's check Airbnb. And there's no Airbnbs, but people were literally Airbnb-ing a patch of sand, like bare land with a campfire pit and a bathroom and a picnic table.
Oh, wow.
And they were charging $50 a night. And we were like, jackpot. This is perfect.
Oh, wow.
Because it was exactly what we needed. We just wanted a place to pitch our tent, have a campfire and hang out, and then go into the park the next day. And this property had 10 of these sites.
Okay.
And it was full. That was like the aha moment for me, where I was like, okay, this guy who has a piece of land is making $500 a night to take people's trash out. Yeah. That was it. And that was a big moment for me, where I was like, okay, I think that there's an opportunity here.
Yeah. Wow. That's cool. Okay. So, and you were still working your job in SF while you were doing this. And then you had this realization like, whoa, there's an opportunity here. Okay. So what was the next step then? Why did you stop your job, and then what came next?
Yeah. So I was starting to get burnt out at my company, and I actually asked for 6 months of unpaid leave to go travel. And as I was doing that, I heard about an opportunity to apply for a scholarship for this really cool entrepreneurial school. Well, it's a small entrepreneurial school in Austin, Texas called Acton. Okay. It's an MBA program. And so I applied for the scholarship and like didn't really think that much about it, and then ended up getting it.
Oh, wow.
And it was a full ride to go to this business school.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And
in person?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was an accelerated year-long program for this really innovative, unorthodox entrepreneurial business school.
Nice.
And so when I got the scholarship, I was like, okay, put in my notice and moved to Austin.
Wow. Wow. Okay. And so what about making money at this point?
Fortunately, I'd saved up a fair bit from sales. And so nice. I basically was able to go 10 months without to go to school, and I didn't have to pay for school, so I just had my living expenses.
Did you when you started this, did you have an idea of, hey, I have a backup plan in a year if let's say I don't have an idea, or if I'm not running with some new venture that I'm starting, like, hey, I'll get back into the workforce, or maybe I'll go back to this company I've been with?
I was fortunate to have left my company on good terms, and
they basically invited you back.
Yeah, they pretty much said, if you want to come back after school, you're welcome. Nice. So it was nice to have that safety net. Yeah, although I didn't really have any interest going back.
For sure. So you were motivated. Okay, so the year-long entrepreneurship program, I bet you met some cool people out there.
Oh, it was so cool. We had Olympians, Navy SEALs, someone who worked in the entertainment business as an artist manager, this like 22-year-old who started a company. It was a really cool group. It was awesome.
Wow. So what did you then do with that experience you got out of this accelerated program after?
Yes.
Or during? You know, I'm sure a lot of people were trying to build things during this, right?
Yeah. So there was a program at Acton called Life of Meaning, and that was a pillar of the curriculum, and it basically takes you through all of these reflective questions and exercises to help you answer three, what are kind of they coined as life's three most important questions, which is what did I do that was meaningful, or what was my impact? And then two was who did I love and who loved me? And then the third is, was I a good person? Okay. Wow. And so the Life of Meaning takes you through all these different exercises, like writing your eulogy and all these other things. And I remember when I was going through those exercises, I was like, man, everyone should have access to these types of questions. They're so important, but in work and school, no one's addressing it. And that was just kind of a passing thought as I went through the program. But through those reflective exercises, it helped me realize that I wanted to get into and start impacting the outdoor space. And help people reconnect with nature. And so when it came time to designate my thesis, I chose like privatized camping and glamping, or like outdoor hospitality. I'll just call it glamping because that's easier. Right. So I did my thesis, which was basically I wrote a business model for my program, and it was glamping and Joshua Tree. So I wrote out the whole business plan, and they call in all these potential investors and industry professionals, and you get to present your business pitch to them. So that was my final thesis.
That's awesome. And that came at the end of the 10-month program.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. So how did you get any sort of validity that, hey, this is a legitimate idea? Did they give you feedback for that? Were there any sort of resources that you could take advantage of to get actually started with this? Or did you just say, I'm doing this whether anyone likes it or not?
Yeah, got some great questions, some good introductions, some good things to think about, hard feedback, good feedback, and it kind of helped me fine-tune my idea and think about it in different ways. And actually towards the end of my program, I was chatting with my mom on the phone, and basically she's like, oh, my grandma mentioned that she'd always wanted to go to Mount Kilimanjaro in Africa. And my mom was like, oh, I really want to do that. And I was like, I'll go with you. She was like, are you serious? And I was like, yeah, I'll go with you after I graduate.
Oh, wow.
So we ended up going to Mount Kilimanjaro in Tanzania in East Africa post-graduation.
Okay.
My mom and I climbed it, and it was an amazing experience. And then we tacked on a safari in the Serengeti afterwards, and we ended up staying in glamping.
Wow.
And so East Africa and like the safari experience is really the birthplace of transient luxury experience out in the wild, out in the bush, as they call it. And I got to see that, and I got to see how people were running these glamping operations literally in the savannah, you know, and you go to sleep listening to lions, and
that's unreal.
It was a wild experience. And so after that trip was over, I was like, hey Mom, I don't think I'm gonna get on the return flight. I'm gonna stay.
Oh.
Yeah. So
you just wanted to hang out there.
Yeah. And I knew I really am passionate about world travel. And so I decided to just hoof it and start exploring, and mostly to have fun. But I also was doing a lot of R&D and trying to see as much outdoor and experiential hospitality kind of all over the continent as I could. And I got to see Rwandan like rainforest mountain bungalows and Zanzibari beach cabanas and like Zanzibar desert glamping.
Wow,
and
what a cool way to do R&D.
Yes, yeah,
that's sick.
So
Man.
Yeah, it was amazing. And then when I was in Cape Town, South Africa, I was at a hostel and heard this German girl was saying that she was going to Africa Burn. And I was like, Africa Burn, like Burning Man? She's like, yeah, it's Africa's Burning Man.
Oh,
and
wow. And where was this?
It's about 5 hours inland in South Africa in the desert.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. And so I was like, is there still tickets? She's like, yeah, there's still tickets. And I was like, are you going with the camp? She's like, yeah, you want me to see if I can introduce you? Whoa. It was like 5 days before the event. Yeah. So I called the camp lead and was like, hey, is there any chance I can be a part of your camp? And he's like, sure, like let's grab coffee. So I grabbed coffee with him, and he's like kind of interviewing me to see if I'd be a good fit for the camp. And he was like, can you help out at all? And I was like, I got nothing but time, like just point and shoot. I'll do it. I'll be your intern. And he was like, all right, you're in. So not knowing a soul, like ended up going with this camp called State of Bliss, and I ended up helping them build this really key piece of their art installation and experience called the Bliss Portal.
And what was the demographic of people like? Was it mostly South Africans?
It was probably a third South African, or half South Africans, and mostly the others were Europeans.
Okay.
Yeah. And about 10,000 people.
Gosh, so how long were you in Africa total during this time?
I was in Africa for 4.5 months.
Okay, yeah, it's a long time.
Yeah.
Okay, so you had come out of the Acton program, and you're using this time in Africa, of course, to just experience the world, doing things you love to do, but also really trying to solidify what your idea is that you want to put into action. Did you have much of a structure in the back of your head, or were you as far as what you wanted to get out of this Africa experience, or did you just free flow it and say, hey, if this works out by the time I'm done here, then great, but if not, then okay? Mostly
what I was trying to do was I would go to these properties and I'd take a ton of photos, like thousands of photos of the units, the amenities, the everything. And I try to speak with the managers to find out about guest experience and the story of the property, and just try to get a sense of. And again, I'd see all these properties and I'd try to find like the little pieces that I wanted to take and incorporate like that 10%. And I remember going to this crazy place in Namibia, and I was traveling in like April, which is, there's not that many tourists in Africa to begin with. And then I was going in absolute tourist low season. Okay. And I went to this like random property in the Namibian desert, and I was the only one there. And I get this like epic campsite, and there's not much there, but it looks out over hundreds of miles of desert. And then it has a toilet, literally a toilet set on like a ledge, looking out over the desert, open air, like no walls, and a shower. And it was just like this open air shower and toilet.
Oh my gosh.
And I remember thinking, I was like, this is one of the coolest experiences of my life. Like I'm just having a shower, like looking out at the Namibian desert for hundreds of miles, like in the sun. And I was like, oh, I'd love to incorporate this in my future property, which I haven't done yet, but I'm planning to in the future.
That's
yeah,
it's a good idea.
Yeah,
man, that'll throw people off, right?
Yeah, seriously. So it was just, it was a lot of like inspiration taking and just trying to get different ideas of what I wanted to add to my property.
Okay, so you had this cool idea. What comes next? So after the Africa experience, what did you come back to the U.S. and start doing? What was in between that point and starting Sandy Vans?
Yeah, so the first thing, I came back to the U.S. and I had a truck, and I kind of did the same thing in the American West. So I kind of made the back of my truck livable-ish. Yeah. Basically just put a bed in there.
Yeah.
And
what kind of truck was it?
It was just a 2000 Toyota Tundra with a canopy on the back. Okay. And I just like installed a lifted bed with drawers and like some other basics. And I did a 2.5 month road trip through the American West, checking out a lot of the national parks. I got as far north as Jasper and Banff in Canada, and then all the way down to like Phoenix and the Grand Canyon. Wow. Checking out like Under Canvas and any of the other glamping players kind of out west. And just having fun, but also like trying to speak with as many managers as I could and look at as many properties as I could along the way.
Got it. So you're looking to take action, find a place you could buy.
Yeah.
Got it.
And then I got to go to the real Burning Man in the US, and that was an incredible experience.
So I'm sorry, you had never been to Burning Man before the South Africa Burning Man?
Yep. So my first burn was at Africa. And then it took the Germans to help me get into a camp and get a ticket in America, which is, it's really hard to get a ticket for Burning Man. So So why was that experience incredible? I feel like the way you talk about it, and from my talks with everyone else who have gone, I've never been, it does sound like a kind of a very pivotal, almost life-changing experience for many people. How did your experience of Burning Man impact you and potentially your pursuit of being an entrepreneur in this space? We could have a whole podcast just on Burning Man. I'll try to keep it brief, but I think why it's really special to me is that like Burning Man is put on by the attendees. Yeah. Like Burning Man doesn't provide anything. So all the experiences, all the art cars, all the pyrotechnics, all the music, DJs, lights, everything is put on by the people going. And it's in super harsh, difficult conditions. And so, it's a ton of work, and it's really hard. It's expensive. It's a big sacrifice.
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. And so that does two things. Like the people who are there, one, they really want to be there. And then two, they're creators. Yeah. And that's probably my favorite thing about the burn is you are just surrounded by 60,000 creators who are creating music, creating lights, art cars, experiences, like anything you could ever imagine. And so just getting to be around those people who are breathing life into these projects that most people only talk about was really special and very energizing, and like helped kind of give me the creativity and the confidence to like take actions towards these dreams.
Got it. That's huge. So yeah, like when you're inspired by other people who are going to let that creative state really flow through, and that's where you're actually going to start making things happen, I feel like.
Yeah. So that was really big for me, just from like a personal experience. I mean, yeah.
Nice. Okay. So you came out of Burning Man motivated, fair to say.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool. And then did you end up doing anything with this glamping actual thing? Okay, tell us about that.
Fast forward. So January 2020, I finished my travels and I officially start my property search January 2020.
And just to not confuse the audience, I asked that question because Sandy Vans is a different thing from this glamping idea that Connor had.
Yeah. So I knew I wanted to get in the outdoor hospitality space and start impacting the outdoors and reconnecting people with the outdoors in like a really special way. And so I started my property hunt January 2020. I reached out to a friend of mine that I grew up with.
That's quite the time, huh?
Yeah. So we end up finding this amazing site. It's actually like one of the original glamping sites in the U.S., but it used to be called Panacea at the Canyon. It was near Bend, Oregon, near Smith Rock State Park. And we saw it was for sale, so we went and chatted with the owners. I chatted with my friend. We did a ton of research. We put together a bunch of business projections. We went to them and we crafted a deal and put an offer in on the property. It was a 2-year lease to buy. And so the goal was basically they were a divorcing couple, so the business, they set up this gorgeous property with like 40 acres, overlooking a river canyon, these beautiful tents, but they were divorcing, and so the business never like really got off the ground. They had no profit to show for it. And so our goal was, we said, hey, let us come in and run this for 2 years. We'll restore and invest in the property, turn the financials around, start to show a profit and bookings and revenue, and then we'll go for a loan from a bank or a private investor or an SBA to purchase the property outright.
Got it. Okay.
And so we went back and forth and we negotiated, and we went to the property like 3 times. Yeah. And this was like mid-March, and it was so funny because I like wrote down in my journal, I was like, all right, we're gonna knock the socks off our first guest by Memorial Day. So this was like late May 2020. Yeah. So that was the goal. And basically, like, we finally come to terms on lease price and the terms of the deal. And then the day we were supposed to sign, COVID reached the U.S., reached Seattle. And then the stock market dropped like 15%. Whoa. And we're like, all right, let's see what happens tomorrow. And then the stock market dropped 10%. Yeah. And companies like the Marriott lost 33% of their share value in 2 days. Yeah. And so my business partner and I were like, do we really want to do this? So we went back to the owners and we were like, hey, we still want to do this, but we're not going to come up to your price, because we'd negotiated. They're like, come up to this price and we'll do it. And we were about to say, okay. And then we went back to them and we said, okay, we're not going to come up to your asking price, but we will honor our original offer in light of this COVID situation. And we don't know how it's going to pan out. Yeah. And they were like, no, we're going to hold firm. So we were like, okay. So we walked away. So this is where the story gets crazy. This is when the roller coaster starts. Okay. And it's probably going to be a little bit difficult to follow, so I'll try to keep it as simple as I can. Okay. But essentially, around that time, everyone's just stuck at home, and I'm just sat at home, and I see all these people like doing all these cool things to give back to the community. You know, like free Facebook yoga or like free Zoom yoga, or playing piano on Facebook Live. For sure. Doing these cool things to give back. And I was in a pretty comfortable position during the pandemic. So I was like, what could I do? And I was also feeling really disconnected. Everyone was feeling disconnected. Yeah. We were all isolated.
Where were you living at this time?
I was at my folks' place. Okay. In Lake Oswego, Oregon. Okay. And so I was just at their place, like not paying rent and just kind of sitting there. So I was like, what could I do to be productive with my time? And I remember thinking back to when I took Life of Meaning at Acton for my MBA. And I was like, well, what does everyone have right now? Tons of time. And everyone's disconnected right now. So I was like, and I was feeling really disconnected from all the amazing people I met traveling.
Weren't we all?
Yeah. So I was like, well, what if I put together a program and I take people through some of the Life of Meaning exercises that I took, and we do it through Zoom, and like we can have people that I met in Africa and in Europe and in all over the US. And like, I really wanted I wanted to reconnect with my energizers, like the entrepreneurs out there, the inspiring people who were starting businesses and doing exciting things, and like, you know, get those people together in a room. So I wrote up this whole curriculum. I knew all the 30 people that I wanted to invite to the first cohort, and like I had it all drawn up in like 2 days. I wrote up this whole curriculum. Like I barely slept. Wow. And I was just sat there, and I was super scared and nervous and didn't want to hit send on the email. And then I was going through another program at the time with a woman that I met in South Africa, and the program that she was in, her program also helped inspire mine and give the blueprint and everything. So she was pivotal to this getting off the ground.
Yeah.
But she had this week called Walk Through Fear. And it was about like, what's something that you really want that you're not taking action on. And literally like the day I, like 3 days had passed and I hadn't sent the email, and then that comes up in the program I was taking online. It was like Walk Through Fear.
Got it.
So I was like, damn it. All right, I guess I have to do this.
Yeah.
So
wow. And how many people were going to receive this email?
I sent the email to like 35 people.
Okay.
And it was like they were kind of scary people to reach out to, like a lot of mentors and idols.
Got it. Wow.
So after that class, that call, I hit send, and the response was really positive. And we were able to sign up 20 people for the first 8 week. It was an 8 week program, and it was built on so 8 weeks, 56 days. So we had 56 daily journal prompts. And then each week had a different growth project, like a theme for the week.
And so was this Journey Vitae?
Yeah. So it started as Life of Meaning, and then it became Journey Vitae.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah.
So this really came first, before Sandy Vans, before Sage Outdoor.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
And you've been doing that the longest.
Yep.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So
let's see, it's 23. It's been 3 years. Dang.
Wow. Yeah.
So it's been running for 3 years.
Yeah. And so was it all online then?
Yeah. So it was 100% through Zoom. We'd have a Zoom meeting every Sunday morning, because that was the only time that people could do it in Africa, Europe, and the US and South America. Wow.
And so you took things that you learned from the programs you did, like the one with the lady in South Africa, and also the entrepreneurship school in Austin, and kind of created your own version of this, it sounds like.
Yeah, it was most heavily influenced by the Life of Meaning. And I called the president of the school and I was like, hey, I'm going to do this. Is it all right if I use your guys' material? And he's like, okay. And then I also asked the South African woman, I was like, hey, I'm doing this program. I wanted to use some of your stuff. Can I do that? And then just took a bunch of other small things that I've learned along the way from all these different obscure life experiences and kind of wove it all into, a unique program.
That's incredible, man. So I want to understand, like, could you give us a little bit more detail about an 8 week experience?
Yeah. So the very first growth project, we begin with the end. And so the very first assignment is to write your eulogy. And then you come on to the next call and you share your eulogy with your group. Yeah. With the idea being that, death is the ultimate kind of synthesizer for what's important to you. Like, what do you want to accomplish before you die? What do you want to be remembered for? And so that's the very first thing. And it also helps you get to know your cohort very fast. Yeah. And then week 2 is diving into gratitude. So you start focusing on gratitude in your life. You write 2 gratitude letters, one to a person who's helped you most and one to a person who's hurt you. Oh, wow. And you actually give the letter to the person who's helped you. Whoa. And if you're really
That's powerful.
If you want bonus points, you read it to them. And then the one for the person who's hurt you is just, you don't give that to them. It's just for processing, and it's just to kind of help you practice seeing the positives in even really tough situations.
Yeah. Wow.
And then week 3, you dive into relationships. Who's energizing you? Who's taking energy away? What are like the unique strengths of relationships? What do you value in relationships? Who are the people you gravitate towards? And starting to think about who you're spending your time with and how you might be able to kind of tweak things or reconstruct that so that you're surrounding yourself in ways and with the people that are really bringing out the best in you.
Wow. Yeah, this sounds a lot like a program I did once. It was called the Dream Builder program. Cool. And my buddy who's a life coach, he's actually been on my podcast as well. I did it with him, and it helped me a ton. It helped me start this podcast. Helped me just really operate differently in many ways and gain this new awareness of what's possible.
What's the biggest thing you got out of it?
Oh, wow. Well, I think starting this podcast was the biggest one at this point, just from tangible things to look at. I still keep that journal, and I got to look back at it some more, but it basically painted my dream life in such a clear picture. Whereas, day one, you kind of try to just describe, hey, be like, you're encouraged to be as unreasonable as possible. when you say, what is your ideal state in, 5 and 10 years from now or something? And you say these things that sound crazy, right? Not realistic at all. And then as you go through this program for 3 months, it is all of a sudden, whoa, this is actually very possible. So that was probably the biggest part I got out of it was, these things that seem unrealistically large are indeed possible.
I love it. That sounds that sounds very similar. And
Yeah.
It sounds amazing. And like that intentionality, right? Taking some time to just think about these questions and these things and what you want and like starting to paint a picture of where you want to go.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's amazing. I'm glad you got that so much out of it. And it's funny that you started the podcast, because the podcast honestly is very similar in mission to Journey Vitae in terms of like bringing people together who are taking action and trying to help inspire people in like this collective think tank of like positivity and constructiveness.
Yeah. No, that's cool, man. Really cool parallel there. Okay, so Journey Vitae has been going on ever since then. It's been going well. Are you able to share anything around the business of that? Like, has that been working in your favor? How do you scale your contribution to this with all these people? People?
It's gone through all sorts of evolution. So we ran the first cohort, and then a bunch of people wanted to do the second, and then a lot of the people who took that wanted to help out with the program, so they started helping, and then we ran more, and then a lot of folks stepped up to help add their insights. We took a lot of feedback, and we really evolved the content in the program and tried to make it as good as it could be. And we were really never sure whether to have it be like a nonprofit or for-profit. Is it a quantity thing or a quality thing? And it was, we kind of navigated that. And so Journey Vitae now today, there's been 14 fellowships of 12 people each that have finished the program. And then we have a huge emphasis on diversity in a global community. So we've had 15 countries represented in about 24 states.
Very cool.
So that's kind of where it is now. And then the last 3, I wasn't involved in. So I simply there was other people who wanted to step up and lead. And so, they took the mantle and kind of led things, and I was just like a resource in case they had questions.
That's awesome though, that it got to that point where it was your baby, but it could operate with other people picking it up.
Yeah. And Journey Vitae, as far as like my life story, I would say is the thing I'm most proud of that I've ever gotten to be a part of. Yeah. And like the things that people have gotten out of it and the steps they've taken in their own life has been absolutely humbling. Like it blows me away. And so I think like if I look back on my deathbed, that would be what I'm most proud of that I've done in my life so far.
Well, I'm glad we spent some time talking about that then. That's awesome.
So that's the passion project.
Yeah. Okay.
And so around the same time.
And it makes you money though, right?
I took a little bit of money from it originally. Now it's nonprofit. So all the proceeds from Journey Vitae now, as of the last 6 months, go towards our Burning Man camp. Which I'll kind of maybe get into a little bit later. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, let's do that. So I assume a good transition there is to talk about Sandy Vans.
Almost, not quite.
Okay. Serious.
But we'll get to Sandy Vans, and I'll try to go through this relatively quickly. And this is where the failures and the chaos start.
Okay.
So I guess failed business number 1 was Panacea at the Canyon. So we basically failed to get that property.
COVID interrupted.
Yeah. And so that was kind of failure to launch number 1. And that was after putting a lot of time and resources into that. And then, so around this time I started Journey Vitae, but I was like, I need to do something. And a good friend of mine had just started this dog leash company called Nobo Pets, and he raised $50,000 in a Kickstarter.
Oh, wow.
He's actually the head engineer at Sandy Vans now.
Oh, okay.
And he's a really brilliant engineer, was working on hypersonic rockets like until COVID.
And then you started a dog leash company?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so it's so random. But basically we were like, all right, it's COVID. E-commerce pet products are exploding. Everyone's getting dogs. Everyone's shopping online. I was like, this seems like one of the better things I can do with my time right now. Yeah. So I helped them launch Nobo Pets, nobopets.com. It still exists, but it's pretty in hibernation mode for the most part. but yeah, so then for the remainder of that, for about 12 months, I was doing Journey Vitae and Nobo Pets. And Nobo did pretty decent. I mean, we built a lot of the bones and framework of like a solid company, and we got about $150,000 in sales in the first year. And it was like starting to get some momentum. Wow. And then
that's good first year for dog.
Yeah, we didn't make much money from profit, but
fair enough. Yeah.
But it was poised to start doing well. We'd like got everything in place. The website was beautiful. You know, we had about 1,000 customers, and then I decided to move to San Diego.
Okay.
And we decided to move to San Diego to launch Nobo and be closer with some of our friends down here. And around that time, COVID is just still kicking around, and our main manufacturer, who was manufacturing our dog leash, got acquired, and then they stopped manufacturing our dog leashes for us. So then we tried to find a new manufacturer, and then also our bags, which was the main expendable or like reoccurring product that we would sell to people. Our manufacturer overseas went out of business. And so then all of a sudden, like our two main products, we couldn't purchase anymore, and we were trying to get new products. And basically for like several months, there wasn't we didn't have any product to sell. And I was like the sales guy. So I was at this company, and I was like, well, I need to do something else. Yeah. And I drove from San Diego up to Portland to actually sell my car and buy my brother's car and drive it back down to San Diego. And on the way, I was actually chatting with this guy today, the CEO of Sagra Farms, who I met at Africa Burn. This is also random. He's a Stanford kid who was like employee number 50 at Lyft. I met him at Africa Burn. He's starting a company called Sagra Farms, and basically it's glamping, but they bring it to sustainable farms, and it's a huge farm to table experience. Oh, cool. So he was setting up their first property. I called him as I was driving through Sonoma because I knew he lived there. And I called him and I was like, David, I'm driving through Sonoma. You want to get lunch? Yeah. He's like, we're actually setting up Sagra's first property at Stemple Creek. So I can't right now. And I was like, you're setting up right now? Yeah. And he's like, yeah. It's like, do you guys need a hand? And he was like, yeah, sure. So I drove over and helped them set up. Literally, they're accepting their first guests like 2 days later. And I ended up helping them set up their first property for like 2 days. Wow. And then got to be a part of their first dinner. And I just loved it. Like everything he was doing with his concept was exactly what I wanted to do. And I was like, David, this is amazing. And I ended up reaching out to someone I was talking with at the beginning of COVID, and they had this beautiful 400-acre ranch called Kasari Ranch, about 90 minutes north of San Francisco. Wow. Stunning. The top of the property, you could see the ocean, no neighbors, gorgeous. And so I called up the owner of that ranch, and I was like, hey, I'm 30 minutes away at Sagra Farms. You want to come down here and meet David and see what they're doing here? Because I think we could bring this to your property. So she drove down, looked at it, was like, yes, this is amazing. Let's do this at my property. So now all of a sudden, like, I wasn't even planning on stopping here. Yeah. So I ended up staying there for like 3 or 4 nights. I stayed the night at Kasari Ranch, which is 30 minutes away. We're chatting with David, and we're basically like, all right, what can we bring to this property? Yeah. So I wrote up a business plan, started to put the projections together, wrote up a customer experience. We put together a partnership. So this would be a JV. So basically they would provide the land, and I would bring the units and operate it, and then pay them a % of the revenue. And like 4 nights there, everything was like pretty much good to go. And I was like, okay. They were kind of waiting to give me, they're like, yeah, we're in. Yeah. And then I drove back up to Oregon, sold my car, bought my brother's car. Wow. And like 3 days passed, and I hadn't heard from the owners of that property. So I'm driving down to go back to Kasari Ranch, and I'm like an hour away. Yeah. And she calls me, and she's like, hey, our well just ran dry for the first time. And there's fires like 20 minutes away. Oh yeah. In April. So this is April of 21. Yeah. And there's all these fires happening around the area. And she's like, we decided that we don't want to have glamping on the property due to the risks. Oh boy. And she's like, yeah, I think we're going to sell the property, which they ended up doing. Yeah. And so I'm like in my car driving to their property, and they're like,
It's a no-go.
Yeah, we're not moving forward. So like to keep tabs of everything, now we've got failed at Panacea.
Yeah.
Failed at, well, Novo Pets was kind of teetering at this moment.
Yeah.
And then failure to launch Ekasari Ranch. And and then I basically had stepped away from Novo at the time to go do some recruitment consulting to make some money, and then I was going to go all in on Journey Vitae and try to make it like a for-profit thing and scale it. And so this is there's a lot of moving parts, so it's a bit confusing. But so all of a sudden I said no. I said no. I canceled Journey Vitae. I canceled starting it to do this recruitment consulting that I was going to do to go all in on this stunning. I mean, this is like a once in a lifetime opportunity. Once in a lifetime property opportunity being this ranch 90 minutes north of San Francisco. I mean, it was like a dream come true. And then it just fell apart. You know, maybe I could have done something better in the deal, like got something in writing before I, cleared my plate. Yeah. So there's some lessons there. But all of a sudden that falls apart. And then I go back and there's really not a lot happening at Nobo. And I essentially was like, okay, what can I do to scrape something together? Yeah. We're coming into the summer, a year into COVID, and the outdoor hospitality industry is now booming. Like record years, people are out camping, people are outdoors, and glamping is like exploding. And I was like, this is going to be a historic year for outdoor hospitality because hotels still aren't open. International travel still isn't open. So this is going to be a banner year for the industry. And I'm just like sat here with nothing to do. So I got on my LinkedIn and I just started reaching out to everybody I knew in the industry and was like, hey, do you need any help? Do you know, like calling them, like, do you guys need a hand at your property? And I just wanted to go work at a glamping company and get hands-on experience in the industry and see under the hood, see the operations, understand the bookings, all of that. So I ended up seeing this position posted for a company called Roam Beyond, and they're opening their flagship location in Glacier, Montana. Right. And call them up, tell them about my weird skill set, and apply for this position. And it went great. The two founders, I had like 2 hour-long interviews with them, and it couldn't have gone better. They're like, we want to offer you the position as guest experience manager. Would you like to fly up this weekend to see the property? So they flew me up to Glacier, saw the property. It was awesome. Their concept was amazing. The co-founders were great. And I was like, okay, this is what I'll do. Like, this is what I can do to take advantage of this summer. Sure. And so then I called the owners back and I was like, hey, this position would be it'd be a massive step back in compensation from what I used to make. Back when I was working in sales. And I was like, hey, I've been taking a massive step back, and I understand you guys are in a startup. But before I pack up and move across the country basically to do this and work nights and weekends all summer long, is there any way that you guys could make up the compensation gap with equity in the company? Because I wanted to be an owner. And they were basically like, we haven't budgeted that in. And they'd come up with an insane valuation for the company. And so like what I was asking for was tiny. Yeah. And it turned into probably like the biggest, most intense business discussion of my life. And I was on the phone going back and forth with these two co-founders for about an hour, trying to kind of explain to them, why I thought I deserved that and the risk that I was taking to move up and do this. Yeah. And they basically were like, we'll give you equity if you earn it in 6 to 12 months. Okay. And I was like, yeah, I don't know if I'm like ready to move across the country, on a promise. Yeah. And so they're like, all right, we'll think about it. So they call me back they send me a text 30 minutes later and they say, hey, we don't think you're the right fit for the position. We're rescinding the offer.
Oh, geez. Oh boy.
And I would have taken it. At just the offer with no equity. Oh man. If they had said it, but they just pulled the rug out, said, nope, we don't think you're the right guy for the job. And I was devastated.
Yeah, I bet. Yeah.
And I used to be a recruiter, and I used to negotiate compensation packages.
For sure, yeah.
And so
some people just operate differently with that kind of stuff, man. It's interesting. You get to some of these different cultures, locations like that. It's an outdoor glamping company in Montana, right? They don't take it the same way as kind of the world we were in San Francisco. with all the tech and the fast moving stuff going on. I feel like you were kind of bringing that business vibe to them, and they're rubbed the wrong way maybe.
Yeah, it was absolutely devastating.
Yeah.
It was like, I remember where I was when I got the news, and like it was like getting punched in the stomach twice by Mike Tyson.
Man, okay, so like I definitely want to
how we doing on time?
Yeah, let's hear about. We're at 56 minutes, so let's talk about. So how did this experience? It sounds like you gave some preface to how you met the other founders of Sandy Vans already, right?
So this is kind of like the critical moment in the story. So here I am now. I'm basically like 3 years into when I left my last job, of like not having a steady paycheck. Went to this kind of obscure MBA, traveled for a year, and had 4 failure to launch startups. Yeah, Kasari Ranch, Panacea, and now Roam Beyond, where they rescinded the offer, and I was at an all-time low, like devastated. And I was connecting with my friends from Santa Clara, and they're becoming like directors at tech startups and IPOing and like getting this crazy equity. And I was just like, I've got nothing to show for anything that I've done in the last 3 years. Like nothing to show for it. And Nobo wasn't really doing anything. I'd stepped away from Nobo at that point, which wasn't necessarily a failure, but far from a success. And so, that was kind of my ultimate low. And I remember being like kind of devastated. So I reached back out to my old recruiting friends who offered me the job and asked if they, went back with my tail between my legs and asked if they'd still hire me. And unfortunately they did. So then I was back in San Diego. And so October 21 rolls around, and this is kind of the month where everything changes, because my friends reach out to me, Alan Mondas, who's now the CEO, who's a good friend, and then Evan Purcell, who was also helped found Nobo Pets with me, the engineer. And they're like, we want to start a van company. Wow. And I was like, what do you mean? They're like, our friends in San Diego were really big into surfing and kiteboarding, so we're always chasing like wind and waves. And we'd bought a Sprinter van from someone else, and then Evan had built his van, and we'd been traveling around with them to go chase wind and waves, and just had like an incredible time. And we saw an opportunity in the market to start using, sophisticated engineering techniques to mostly computer cut a lot of the install, a lot of the internal parts and design. And so we were like, well, maybe there's a way that we could get into a different, start using really efficient and quality materials in these builds and do something different. And it was an industry that we were all excited about, outdoor adventure. And we thought we had a pretty good case. So we launched Sandy Vans. Wow. So that was October of 21. And there was 6 founders, 3 investors. I was a small investor, and then four guys that were putting time in. So there's 2 full-time guys, and then me and another guy were part-time. So we started launching that. And we bought our first 2 Sprinter vans and started cut holes in them and started to do all these products. And
how much does a Sprinter van cost?
A 2-wheel drive's about $50,000 and a 4-wheel drive's about $70,000. Okay. So we bought those on a loan, like on a financed. started. Oh boy. Wow. And fortunately the bank knew, so it wasn't that sketchy. And started going gung-ho, and I was part-time. My role was fairly minimal compared to the other guys. They were the real heroes, but it was a very talented group of people that came together to do this, that brought kind of the unique skills that we needed. And then our investors were really smart money, and so they were really helpful in like guiding us as well. And it was really a group of just like 6 friends. That's cool. So we built our first 2 vans, and then we got in touch with this group of kiteboarding kids from Hood River called the Sickos. They're like now YouTube famous. And they were just coming up, and we reached out to them. We're like, we love your guys' video, like your video content and storytelling. Do you want to go on a road trip with us from San Diego to La Ventana at the tip of the Baja Peninsula, and we'll like kite and surf and get a bunch of footage with our first 2 vans. And great idea. Be like our brand launch and product testing. So they said yes. Really? And so Sandy Vans, this was January of 21. We took our first 2 vans, and we name all of our vans after action heroes.
Okay.
So we had Jackie Van and Sylvester Stallone.
Okay.
And we gave the Sickos a van, and then the Sandy Vans crew was in another one, and we spent 2 weeks traveling down the Baja Peninsula, surfing and kiting in the vans and getting all this awesome video content.
Wow. That's such a cool way to kick things off with marketing, and yeah, it's a great spot, a great collab there with some influencers in the space.
It was pretty awesome. And so in October, I decided to go to the Glamping show in Denver for the second time, which is like the big conference event. And I decided to go for Sandy Vans. And I ended up seeing this speaker who's the president of Sage. Her name's Sherry, and she was giving a presentation on feasibility studies for launching glamping businesses. And I was really impressed by her. And I used a lot of the same approaches for assessing opportunities and writing projections. And it seemed like they were just like very well regarded in the space and working on some amazing projects. So I chatted with her after the show and told her about my weird and unique skill set. And she was like, do you want to, like, she's like, we can barely keep up with demand on the outdoor side. Do you want to help us spearhead the growth? And
very cool.
I was like, wait, you're telling me I can get paid to look at all the coolest projects in the country? She was like, yeah. And I was like, when can I start?
Wow. Okay.
So this is the same month that Sandy Vans started.
Yeah. Whoa, really?
Yeah.
So you basically started Sandy Vans with your buddies, and then you got this job offer.
Yeah.
Pretty legit job offer, kind of all encompassing all the stuff that you've been thinking about doing over the past couple of years.
And
wow.
Yeah, so it was this crazy moment in time. So November of 21, we were launching Sandy Vans. I got my job offer from Sage.
Yeah.
I was still doing recruiting, and then I was still running Journey Vitae.
Oof.
And so all of this was happening
Quite
at once.
the juggle.
Yeah, while we were moving in San Diego.
Wow.
So with all this going on, everything kind of started to work all at once.
Yeah.
And I got super overwhelmed.
I bet.
I hit like a massive burnout wall, trying to do all these things at once.
Yeah.
And after coming back from Mexico and trying to manage all of these things, I hit like just a massive burnout wall. I was exhausted. I wasn't feeling like myself. I didn't want to do anything. And like, I just was so overwhelmed with how much that I had to do. And basically like, on a moment's notice, I was like, there's too much going on in San Diego. I have too much on my plate. Like, I need to get out of here. Yeah. So on a Sunday, I was like, I'm going to move to Bend.
Wow.
Like I just kind of like hit this fever pitch. And so I decided this was like on a Sunday. I was like, something's got to change. So I kind of broke the glass on the emergency red stop button on the roller coaster and pressed it. And so on a Sunday I decided, and by Friday I'd moved up to Bend and moved into my folks' place.
Okay.
And then it was like this kind of radical taking of inventory of like, I've been working so hard to get all these things off the ground, and nothing was working for like 2 years, and then they all worked at once. Wow. So it was kind of like the opposite problem.
Yeah. So when you moved to Bend, though, you were still involved in all of these things.
Yeah.
Okay.
At that time. Well, then I stopped the recruiting. So then I was just doing 3 things.
So you put one thing down, but you still had the other things going. You just needed some space. You needed to change your environment.
Yeah, and I had this crazy choice.
Yeah.
And it was, do I take this opportunity at Sage, which, I'd been researching and working on for 3 years in outdoor hospitality? Do I start this awesome company with my friends?
Yeah.
With some smart folks and a company that I thought had a lot of potential. Or do I keep going with Journey Vitae, which was like my ultimate passion project? Yeah. And I wrestled over the decision for like 4 months. And I kept trying to do all 3. And I hope that being in Bend, being kind of disconnected from a social situation, I basically like didn't see anyone for like 3 months. I was just taking it easy and working and trying to make all 3 work. Yeah. So I got the recruiting off my plate. I left San Diego and got the social things off my plate. So I was just trying to make all 3 work. And then finally in like August of 21, I basically called the Sandy Vans guys and I was like, hey, I'm sorry. Like I can't be putting time into this. I have to do less.
Okay.
which was one of the hardest decisions that I've had to make.
Oh, I bet. Such a cool thing.
And it was like getting momentum.
Yeah.
And we were selling vans, and it was my friends, right? And I remember like calling them to tell them that I just didn't think I just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I like literally broke down in tears.
Oh, I bet.
It was like the first time I've cried in years.
Yeah.
And like telling my friends that I couldn't help them with their dream, and I felt like they were relying on me. So that was when I officially stepped back from Sandy Vans.
Were they supportive?
Super supportive.
Nice.
Yeah, they were great, fortunately.
Good.
So I'm still like a small owner in the company, and I help out where I can, but I have no like expectation of work.
Got it. And you're in San Diego now for the Sandy Vans event, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we got the second annual Burning Vans.
Okay, I love it. Burning Vans. There's a theme here, guys.
Yeah. So Sandy Vans, we wanted it. It's so hard to go to Burning Man. We're like, let's just throw our own.
Yeah.
So last year we threw our first event at this epic location in Jacumba Hot Springs, this event venue there called the Colony. And we had about 100 of our favorite friends out, and brought all of the vans we'd finished, and we got a bunch of awesome musicians like Wake the Wild. And we ended up losing money on the event because we spent so much, but we had like one of the best weekends ever.
That's so cool.
And that's why I'm back here down in San Diego now, is because Burning Van starts tomorrow. So I'm coming back for the second annual.
Yeah. And so that's going to be what, May 5th, 2023.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which,
all right.
You got to come to. I'm going to talk to you about it after.
Okay.
So, we're really excited about it. And I guess maybe kind of an update on where Sandy Vans is now. I mean, the guys have crushed it. So like Alan Mondes as the CEO, Evan Purcell as the kind of evil scientist engineer who can kind of make anything. We've got this wild man named Steven Stolp, who is a custom ambulance builder. Yeah. Who's our publicist, stuntman, and chief artist and builder. Yeah. And then we've got Brian, who's founded Solid Woodworks, and he's our carpenter and like logistics guy. So those four, along with our lead investors, Rick Meese and Jimmy Moore, have absolutely crushed it the last year. We did about $750,000 in sales in our first year, and we're hoping to double that this year.
Wow. Nice.
Like 4 of our customers that we sold to this year are going to be at Burning Vans tomorrow with some of our like most recent and premium rigs.
Nice. That's huge.
And so Sandy Vans is doing big things. The guys are doing an awesome job, and it's just like such a fun company. The customers are great. The lifestyle's great. We're really happy with like our product and the value add. Yeah. We're offering, a lot of our competitors are selling vans between $2 and $250K, and we're offering them at like about $150.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And that's due to like a lot of our efficiencies with our building and our manufacturing. Yeah. And where we're sourcing materials and things like that. Yeah. That's Sandy. So if anyone's looking for a custom outdoor sprinter van, sandyvans.com, because I want to buy one as soon as I can.
There you go.
They're pretty awesome.
Yeah. Well, they look cool as hell just from the website and what I've seen, and everyone should check it out for sure. That's awesome, man. Well, thanks for sharing all that. I feel like we touched on just about everything here. I mean, and now your main focus is basically Journey Vitae. Of course, you're continuing that, and you're doing your main job, Sage Outdoor Consulting. So, wow. But I love. I mean, the part I love to talk about, I love the most is how you walk through all these hurdles that you tripped over, right? With the dog leashes, with the the glamping, and then COVID coming in and interrupting, and all these things. So, I mean, but amazing how things are coming together more recently.
It's been, I guess maybe like the message for your listeners would be, I would say for 30 years of my life, I had no idea what I wanted to do, and it was this like tangled mess of right turns and crisscrosses, and like not till this year did it really feel like everything started to click. What I'm doing at Sage and Outdoor Hospitality feeds really nicely into Sandy Vans. Yeah. And then Journey Vitae also feeds into things like really nicely. So Journey Vitae is just like a passion project. And all the donations that we raise from that program go towards our Burning Man camp that we're starting this year. Yeah. And I mean, I guess maybe the takeaway from your listeners is like, if you're feeling close to a breakdown, it means you might be on the cusp of a breakthrough.
Exactly.
And
that's come up in a couple of different podcasts I've done already. I love how you just said that.
Yeah. So I'm feeling super lucky and fortunate to be where I'm at. And yeah.
Awesome, man. Well, I just want to end it with a couple quick questions here. And thanks for sharing the journey, of course. But one fun thing I'm asking everyone on the show with all these types of experiences they've had is, if you had one idea of an entrepreneurial life hack that is different from the mainstream belief, something that you maybe have learned from your experience that, isn't obvious perhaps, that you could share with people who are, trying to figure it out and go get it, maybe build something of their own, what would you say that is for you?
I was journaling. I told you I was journaling about this in kind of preparation. I was trying to kind of synthesize what I thought were maybe my takeaways from the last 3 or 4 years of slogging through the mud.
Yeah.
I came up with 6 things. The first is ask questions.
Yep.
Which you've obviously gotten very good at, and probably have really been tapping into the power of that through this podcast.
Thanks.
Walk through fear.
Okay.
And that is essentially like,
big one.
If something is feeling really scary or making you nervous or making your palms sweat, like, that's the direction you need to go.
Yeah.
That means you're going the right way. Mm-hmm. And sometimes you just have to take that leap, and it could be really scary, but oftentimes what's on the other side of fear is what is most rewarding in the journey. Mm. And then 3 is to try to surround yourself with people smarter than you. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something when you're early in launching a business or in a career, you might think, oh, I want to take the highest paying job or like at the biggest company, but thinking about, where am I going to get to be surrounded by really bright people that are going to energize me and help me develop, where I can learn and solve complex problems. Mm-hmm. So if you're just starting something, try to find the smartest people and surround themselves with you.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes into number 4, which is connect with the experts in your field. Mm-hmm. So what was, I think, maybe like the underlying key to success and what I've gotten to do is connecting with people like the industry experts. Mm-hmm. And reaching out to them like on LinkedIn. Yeah. And I do the same thing every time when I reach out to someone. I say, hey, I'm really impressed by your experience at this company or doing this thing. Yeah. I'd love to learn a little bit more about your story. Mm-hmm. Let me know if you're free to chat.
Love it.
And then I do just that.
Yep.
And that kind of ties into this idea where if you ask for money, you get advice. And if you ask for advice, you get money. Mm-hmm. And that basically means like if you ask someone for money, they're gonna like tell you what they think you should do.
Right.
But if you go to someone and ask them what they think you should do, they look at it, they stand next to you and look at this problem or this path together, and then they think about how they can help you, and then they'll probably offer their help. Yeah. And then that kind of ties into number 5, which is help people. Mm-hmm. And I think particularly at Sage and like how we've grown business development is, every time I have a call with someone, I end my call with like, is there anything I can do to help you? Yeah. Mm-hmm. And even if they don't end up being a customer for me, if I can introduce them to someone or send them a resource that might help them get where they're going, mm-hmm. there's a good chance that that'll come back to me in some way. Yeah. And they might not be a customer, but maybe they'll refer someone. Mm-hmm. And then the last thing is journaling. Yeah, like self-talk.
Huge fan.
Which is kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah.
And I think, I know this is really long-winded, but for journaling in particular, kind of the 3 things that have helped me most, and I bring my journal with me everywhere. Uh-huh. But what I do daily is gratitudes, like what I'm grateful for that day. Mm-hmm. And then like lessons learned or lessons not learned. Mm-hmm. So any like wins or something that I learned that day, mm-hmm. or something that I'm still trying to learn. Yeah. And asking myself the question of what's the next important thing I need to know. Mm-hmm. And then the last one, and this is what I'll end with, is a proud list. Ooh. And this is something that this has probably been the single greatest impactor for like my own self-talk, like mm-hmm. self-worth. Is in the back of all my journals. I have a page and it just says proud list on the top. And so every time I get on a plane, when you're in that awkward stage before you're taxiing, but you haven't reached cruising altitude and you can't have your tray table down and you can't have anything open and you just sat there. I get out my journal and I think about anything that's happened in the last month or so that I've done that I'm proud of. and I'll write down anything.
Very cool.
In whatever facet. And then if I'm ever feeling really down, I can go back and kind of like read through that and be like, no, like you might feel really down right now, but like look at all these things that you've done and look at all this progress that you've made. So the proud list.
That's cool. I love that journaling method because I'm a huge fan of journaling as well. And I'm going to listen back to this and take notes on what you just said so I can see what I can incorporate, because I do my own version as well of journaling. But anyway, Connor, thank you so much, man, for sharing all this. I actually really like the way you answered that entrepreneur life hack question, because you basically summarized this whole podcast. And you just summarized the lessons that were taken away from your journey. And I noticed that, like I could connect that to parts of the story that you told. So that's really cool, man. I think people will get value out of that. And man, dude, I think you're going to have a great ass time at Sandy Vans, and it's going to be a fun weekend. So before we go, tell everybody how can they find you, social media that you want them to know, how can they be customers of the stuff that you're a part of?
Yeah, if you're interested in a van, you can go to sandyvans.com.
Mm-hmm.
If you're interested in joining Journey Vitae, the self-discovery program, you can go to journeyvitae.com, which is journeyvitae.com, and you can apply on the website, and we'll reach out when the next fellowship's coming up. And then for Sage Outdoor Advisory, that's basically like if you're looking to launch an outdoor hospitality project, that's what we help people get funded for that.
Cool.
And that's sageoutdooradvisory.com.
Okay.
And then, you can read my social media or Facebook. My email is cjschwab10.
Okay.
cjschwab10@gmail.com.
Solid. All right, Connor. Well, appreciate it, man. Great conversation, dude.
Thanks so much for having me on the show. God, I wish we had another hour so I could interview you. It's an honor, and I love what you're doing here. So
thank you,
appreciate
man.
being a guest.
Oh, it's my honor as well. Thanks, man. All right, bye, everybody.
Cheers.
Thank you for joining our conversation today on the Nichols and Dimes Show. Please check out and follow my podcast Instagram at Nichols and Dimes Show. I'd love to have you subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. You can also find it on my website. I welcome and encourage any feedback you can share in the reviews so I can continue to improve and develop the show. Thanks again, and see you next time.